Welcome everyone to today's Lunch and Learn session with ISE. Today's session is our part 3 of our CPQ summer series journey. Today's topic will be focused on the Infor XA integration to Infor CPQ. My name is Sherry Woodrick and I am a senior account executive with ISE, and with me again today as our guest speaker we have Charles Hood, ISE's senior programmer analyst. Charles and I are super excited that you are back here with us today as we are on our third leg of our 4-part series. And before we get started, I just want to touch on a couple administrative topics. Everyone is in listen-only mode, but at any point during this session, you can type a question into the chat feature. And at the end of this session, we will have a Q&A session, and we'll make sure we address all of your questions at the end. If for some reason we run over time, because sometimes we do and you need to drop off, we will make sure all of the questions are documented and sent to you via email. All right, now before we jump into this, and I have officially welcomed everyone, I'm going to turn off my camera and move forward to the agenda. Okay, so the agenda for today, I will go through a quick recap of where we are in the journey, and then we have 2 polling questions for you. And then Charles will take over from there, giving a quick recap of the first 2 sessions, and then we'll get into talking about the standard integration between CPQ and XA, and then we will talk about ISE's unique item generator, which we affectionately term UIG. And then he'll turn it back to me just to talk through the steps for the prototype that we are building for you at the workshop at Empower. And then we'll get to the questions and answers section. So here we are in our journey. We are at journey number 3. We are focusing on we call it migratory data. If you're kind of in theme with the journey, you can see we have our birds that are migrate from one site to another site, so we're taking that theme and building on it with our data moving from one point to another point. We've covered the first 2 sessions already this summer, and then in 2 more weeks we will have a really cool session with 2 customers who are going to share their stories and where they are in their CPQ journey. And then we'll open it up for an open mic roundtable discussion where the customers can answer any questions you may have, as well as an expert panel that will also be joining us. So that'll be a really cool session. I hope everyone can make it. And then last but not least, certainly not least, is our final destination at the Empower Conference, where we will have our workshop on September 14th from 9 to noon Central Time. So more on that in a bit here. So if you haven't registered already for Empower, Christina is going to send you this link into the chat feature. So you can register, making it very convenient and easy for you to register if you haven't already done so. And then the second reminder I have is to register for the CPQ workshop, which, as I said, was that's on Thursday, September 14th from 9 to noon. This is a free workshop. There's no additional cost to it, even though it says it's a ticket. I had someone ask me about it yesterday. It's a free ticket, so you don't have to pay any extra for this. Christina is also including this in the chat for you as well to make it easy for you to register. And as a reminder, we are giving everyone who is participating in this summer series a swag bag that includes lots of goodies that we can ship to either your home address or your work address as compliments from ISE and Infor in making this investment of time with us. So we appreciate your time and want to give you a little token of appreciation for joining us. All right, so let's jump to the polling questions. Our first question is, what release level of XA is your current production environment? Are you at XA release 10, 9.2, 9.1 or prior, or not sure? If you could just take a moment to click that for us, that gives us a good feeling of where everybody is in terms of their XA environment. right, once Christina closes that down, then we can progress to the next one. All right, the next question is, we're wondering if you are currently using ion BODs Infor Open Network for any integrations between XA and any other Infor solution. You can answer yes, no, or not sure. So Infor Ion is a middleware, if you will, between Infor solutions that's very commonly used to integrate ERPs to any additional applications. All right. Once Christina closes that out, then we can continue on moving forward. So now the fun begins. I'm going to turn this session over to Charles so he can start talking about the XA integration, including launching CPQ from right within XA, how to convert a quote from enterprise quoting to a customer order in XA, and then how manufacturing orders can get created with configured components and routing steps. And he will also spend some time talking about the ability to create a unique item number or item revision as part of this process using ISE's UIG tool, as opposed to creating a unique item process. So without any further ado, Charles, I will turn this over to you.
Great, thank you, Sherry. Appreciate it. Let me go ahead and share my screen. Okay, great. All right, can you see my screen okay?
Yes, I can.
Great, thank you, Sherry. Appreciate it. Thank you for that introduction as well. I'm really looking forward to the roundtable discussion. I learned a lot during that roundtable discussion last year with the Infor experts on the XA and CPQ side. Then the two customer experiences, testimonials were incredibly enlightening. So I'm looking forward to that. I felt a lot smarter just having been part of that, so that was great. So yeah, welcome everyone. This is session 3 of the ISE CPQ Summer Journey of 2023. Here it is, August 9th. All right, what will be the agenda for today? I do want to do a quick recap of the first 2 sessions. I want to talk about visual drag and drop configuration. I want to talk about CPQ 2D parametric drawing, the SolidWorks add-in in particular, although the AutoCAD Inventor has a parallel track as well. And then, as Sherry was mentioning, definitely want to talk about completing the CPQ to XA integration. So the big theme today is integrating data, migratory data. So I want to talk about data that CPQ can leverage on the incoming side, and then where that data goes after configured line items have been created in an enterprise quote unquote that gets converted to an order, and then that order is pushed down through ION, the intelligent open network, to XA. So that's what we want to talk about today. We want to talk about how to complete the XA integration as well. So let's do a quick recap of the first 2 sessions. Session 1 was called Quotation Automation. And first, I stressed a lot how Cloud CPQ is an entire suite. It's actually a suite within a suite, so it's kind of suite squared, if you will. Remember, there's 5 applications that make up the Cloud CPQ suite. The 2 main ones that we're been talking about the most by far. I did show you CPQ Analytics last week, so you could see we had it active. It was sitting on top of the Infor Data Lake using Burst. But the main 2 are an enterprise configurator called EC, and I know in the XA world, EC is also electronic commerce, but EC for enterprise configurator. You can think of that as the configurator that runs in the cloud, and then of course enterprise quoting as well. And we looked at enterprise quoting in action. We looked at entering quotes, all the things you can do with quotes, and that kind of goes to the third point, quotation augmentation. We talked about versioning quotes. You can have as many versions as you need. We talked about converting quotes partially to an order or fully to an order. We definitely talked about the quote document. We'll see an example of one of those real quickly here. the customer-facing document that you can generate, the fact that that document gets stored in Infor document management because Cloud CPQ is within the Infor OS suite, which includes IDM and includes Ion API, home pages, Mongoose development tools, and all those very nice pieces of the Infor OS Cloud suite. So yeah, here's a little screen capture from the customer-facing quote document. This is just one item on this particular quote. I like the 2D parametric drawings because they show up within the quote document. And if you zoom in enough, you can see all the numbers and everything. You can control the size of that and everything. This is the out of box. You can make that bigger if you want, but you may remember how we looked at, I was changing the parameters on the wooden door, and it was widening and increasing the height and recalculating the radius of that arch and all of that. You may remember all that. That was the 2D parametric drawing. Okay, session number 2, we focused not so much on enterprise quoting, it was more the visualization capabilities of the enterprise configurator. So we talked a lot about visual engagement, incorporating images, potentially even videos. Remember, I had the that product family, which was all hot tubs or spas, and the very first option that was presented in the configuration session was photos of each of the product lines. So that really helped with the configuration experience. I was able to choose which product line I wanted to, and then I moved on. And then speaking of the hot tub, that's also where we generated the QR code. And everyone that wanted to was able to capture that QR code on a mobile device like I did. And then we showed it in augmented reality, which means, in your space. So you may remember I placed the hot tub, at least virtually. Unfortunately, I'm looking over to the spot where I placed it, and the hot tub is not really there. But anyway, I placed it, in front of my little work desk in my office. So, and you could place it, if you're standing out on your back patio with your cell phone, you could do something like that there. So we saw the possibilities that are involved there. You may remember I was zooming in and out and taking a real good look at all the components of the hot tub and all that. And we talked about the Coleman AI, artificial intelligence module that does integrate with enterprise quoting, and it has huge capabilities for cross-selling, or really recommending cross-selling and upselling potential. It's analyzing user behavior. The example I gave was Amazon. When you're on Amazon, every time you go to a different screen, it's bringing in new suggestions and whatnot. Same thing, Coleman AI can be doing that as well. And it can be performing according to rules you set up, but it's also doing its own data gathering and its own thinking, so to speak, artificial intelligence. All right, here's just to remind you, this was the exploded view of the transformer, and I was able to drill in and look at all the components, the windings and whatnot, the L brackets, the bushings, and all that. And you may remember there were hot zones in that image, and I was able to order replacement parts by clicking on one of the a certain area within the photo. If I clicked on one of the L brackets, no matter if it was zoomed in or out, it brought me to the input box where I could reorder some replacement L brackets. The same thing with those black rubber bushings, as you will remember. Okay, and this is just a screen capture to remind you of the augmented reality. So we had the spa or the hot tub, and I kind of had it floating. What I've done in the past, my PC's wallpaper, my big screen's wallpaper, is a field of orange flowers. So I kind of had it like it was floating in this field of orange flowers. So that's what's going on. That was an example of the augmented reality that we were able to do directly from a enterprise configurator experience. Okay, so there is another type of visual engagement that I did want to talk about, and this is called visual drag and drop. And so I recently received a rule set from Infor, and if the term rule set, I have been told I throw around that term kind of indiscriminately. So a configurator rule set is a file, if you will. I'll show you Design Studio in a little bit, CPQ Design Studio, and it's a collection of programmable actions that control a configuration experience. So that's what a rule set is. It's a collection of different elements that control a configuration experience. What happens on the screen, what happens, remember, on the side in the costing and pricing frame, what happens with 2D and 3D images, variables are getting populated, if then conditions are being evaluated. And then of course there's what's called manufacturing rules that you generate a bill of material and a routing. And you put all that together, all those individual statements, all those elements, you have a rule set that dictates a configuration session. So let me show you. Last time I had you prepared ahead of time to download that QR Reader app. I probably should have told you today the audience participation, you should have some popcorn ready to go. But actually, this isn't going to take too long. I want you to just watch this little movie with me, and it shows you drag and drop configuration. So here it comes. So man, I'm pretty good on my screen size, I guess. There we go. So look at how you're able to drag and drop. So this is like a computer workstation. You're able to place the little case and the little shelf where you want, and it is keeping track behind the scenes of exactly how you've got that all configured. All right, so you can see those hot zones highlighted in the green, and that's what's going on there. So I wanted you to see that. That's visual drag and drop, and I just love this example of it that Infor has on their website. And this, by the way, is a great website for you to go to for all things CPQ. It's a great kind of one-stop shopping, if you will. Lots of links to very helpful documents. The Gartner report on CPQ talks about the interface with the this customer testimonials. There's the Gartner report, and then talks about the interfacing with engineering CAD packages that we'll be talking about a little bit, 2D and 3D, and then it gets into other integrations with CRP, not CRP, I'm thinking of XA, CRM software, and then it also talks about the other types of integrations that we have, like we'll be talking more about the CAD support, and then of course you have ERP support, of course EQ, CPQ integrate with XA, which is the important thing for all of us here today. So that I recommend this website. It's on the slide in a second, so let me move that out of the way. But I want you to see that short little clip, and there it is if you want to see it. I like that that web page a lot because it's kind of one-stop shopping for a summary of all the integrations that the CPQ suite can integrate with, CRM packages, engineering, modeling packages, ERP packages, etc. Plus the Gartner report is there, and I like that little 3D visuals. So that's what I wanted you to see. So we've received the rule set for the shed, and so that's the same thing. The window and doors you can drag and drop, so you have drag and drop configuration there as well. So that's another type of three-dimensional visualization augmentation. So let's talk a little more about that wooden door and the SolidWorks add-in. So where exactly is Cloud CPQ getting the data? Where are those models coming from? What kind of input? And again, today's data migration. So I'm focusing now on this first part on data that CPQ, or when it's in the cloud, the enterprise configurator is using to run and augment and embellish configuration sessions, and of course auto-generating, especially in the case of the 2D here, the 2D parametric drawings, where it's actually generating and reshaping, resizing the drawing as it goes. So let's take another look at the 2D parametric drawings. Okay, so I'm going to focus on SolidWorks, but again, AutoCAD Inventor has an add-in as well, a CPQ 2D add-in. When it comes to 3D, all three of the big players can function. So SolidWorks again and CreoCAD have very native compatibility. Their models that those 3D packages produce can interface with the cloud enterprise configurator. And then Autodesk Inventor, it's not as direct a link, but it can definitely be used as just some intermediate steps you have to take. But with the 2D, we're talking SolidWorks and AutoCAD Inventor 2D models. So, and again, I'm focusing on the SolidWorks add-in, but keep in mind, Autodesk Inventor has its own add-in as well. Okay, so the full name is the CPQ 2D Design Automation SolidWorks add-in. And it does, if you're familiar with SolidWorks, and again, Autodesk Inventor, same thing, shows up as an add-in on your menu bar. And you can use this to develop models that will participate in the 2D parametric drawings. And then the CPQ rule sets can then use and manipulate the 2D files. We'll talk a little bit about that in a second. So here's, I'm on a SolidWorks screen here, and I'm just starting to develop a 2D model. I'm just getting it going here. I'm going to zoom in on this in a second. See up here where I'm circling, it says PCM 2D Studio. PCM is the former branding for CPQ, Product Configuration Management. It was the former name for the CPQ software. So once you get used to that, though, you understand what's going on. So PCM 2D Studio, and you can see here up here how this file's PCM 2D example. And then I know that's a little small, so there it is. That's the add-in that you see. So for those of you who are .NET fans, there's your C# add-in, and then right next to it would be your PCM 2D Studio add-in. And that would produce models that the enterprise configurator can handle, can process, can incorporate into configuration sessions. Okay. All right. So here's the way the user guide is referenced. If you want to look at that, of course, now you need to go to Infor Documentation Central. So I think last year at this time I was telling everyone to go to the support portal or concierge, but now you need to go to Documentation Central, and you'll be able to find this add-in user guide. Of course, I'm referencing the cloud edition because we're talking about cloud-based EQ and the cloud-based EC, Enterprise Configurator. So happy anniversary. Last August, this was real hot off the press at this session. It was brand new that 3D design automation was now supported in the cloud. Of course, now it's a year later, so it's not hot off the press anymore. So all I can say is happy anniversary. So the 3D automation has been supported in the cloud configurator now for a year. And that's the nice thing about the cloud. They're constantly rolling out a lot of really good stuff every time they do the upgrades to cloud enterprise configurator and enterprise quoting. All right. Okay. So what I want you to see here is behind the scenes, and this is, I told you we'd look a little more at Design Studio today. This is a collection. You can see it's all the 2D design automation rules. So there are a lot of rules that you can add to a rule set. And again, a rule set is a set of elements, instructions, if you will, logical statements and definitions that control a configuration setting. So you can see that there's a lot going on here. And the 2D parametric drawings, of course, you're setting your parameters and then you're dynamically outputting the image based upon what's happening in the configuration session. So I want you to see, and this is the CPQ Design Studio for the cloud. So I want you to see this very robust 2D parametric drawing support, provided you have a model that was generated from one of those plugins from SolidWorks or Autodesk Inventor. So I want you to see that. That's all the things you can do. Of course, each one of these is a world unto itself. And here, I just want you to see, these were all the 2D models, not all of them actually, you can see down here. So I was in what's called configure price quote in the Infor OS suite, and it has a really nice place to upload new content, images, and 2D, 3D models and whatnot. So here are the first 25 2D model elements that make that wooden door work, that configuration session work. For example, you may remember on the hinges, It added the hinges to the drawing if you selected the hinges, and you were able to have either 3 or 4 hinges, and then the hinge locations were dynamic. You didn't have to just use the default. So for example, that's the 2D model there. And then if you had the arch on the top and it had to draw an arc, that's the 2D model there. And you can see it just goes on and on, the basic horizontal dimensioning, the vertical dimensioning and whatnot. So all these 2D models exported from SolidWorks and then loaded into the content manager, the CPQ content manager, and then they're available to be referenced in a Design Studio rule set. Okay, Sherry, are there any questions so far? This is, a perfect spot to break, because now we're going to talk about the output from EQ and Cloud Configurator. Are there any questions on that have been brought up?
I am not seeing any questions at this time.
Okay, great. All right, so now we've seen how CPQ can take input, particularly for the 2D models, but a lot of that applies to the 3D models as well. So if image modeling is your jam and your interest, there's a lot to that. There's a whole world there, generating the models and then bringing all that into the Cloud Configurator, and then working with that inside Design Studio. So before I actually make my little segue, promised I'd talk a little bit about Design Studio. So let's look real quickly at the wooden door rule set, because I do throw that term around a lot, and I want you all to have a better idea what I mean by a rule set. So here's, again, it's the Design Studio is a little bit of a programming language. It's kind of like a graphical programming language. Not quite Visual Studio, but, and you bring in all these elements and things are happening. You're updating costs and pricing. You're keeping track of all the options that the user took. You're updating the screen constantly, whether it's the right side of the screen with the configuration options, like you'd be doing here. This is a screen rule. And then this is a detail rule where the right side of the screen, remember, we could see our pricing, or we could see costing, or it would show us a summary of all the options we had selected up to that point. So that's this is fairly involved rule set because of the 2D. There's actually what's called an include rule set, which would be a rule set that runs within a rule set that really handles the 2D. And you're validating your input and whatnot. And yeah, there's the include rule set. So this rule set calls another rule set. And then there's where the 2D, this is where the real magic happens for the 2D automation. And that's another include rule set with a lot of those 2D rules that I showed you in that other screen snip. All the 2D ones right over here on the left. Okay. Now, what you also typically have, and this is another include rule set, is where you have all your manufacturing rules. And this is where, to me, the neatest part, well, the visualization is the neatest part, but this is pretty cool, where you actually convert the user's input to a bill of material in a routing. So here you can see you're collecting data for routing operations. You're also tying together which components belong to that operation. So like the C and the M are more on the manufacturing side as far as component driven, and the O's rules are more for operations. So this is the output that you get that CPQ pushes down to XA includes these manufacturing rule sets. So your bill of material and your routing are fully defined, along with all the definitions for that configuration, like a configuration description, a configured price, a configured cost, configuration ID to keep things unique. We'll talk about those in just a second. But I did want you to see at least have a quick glance at Design Studio. All right. Okay, so let's talk about completing the CPQ to XA integration, building a unique item revision for each configuration. And if you were listening closely to what I just said, one of the core data points in the CPQ integration to any ERP package, and that certainly includes XA, is a unique configuration ID. Every time that combination of manufacturing, bill of material, and routing, and any other variables you want to include is unique, you generate what's called a manufacturing variant, which is a really long field if you want it to be. Every time that's unique, you get a unique configuration ID. In an XA, the configuration ID is a number, starts off at 1, and it can go all the way up to 10 digits. All right, let's take a look. What am I talking about here? Okay, so first of all, in XA, how do you define an item to be configurable in the first place? And you do that at the item revision level. So that item stands in for the entire configurable product family. So for example, the bike, configurable bike that you see the demos of a lot of times, and they use it for the rule set class, that you need an item in XA in your item revision for the site that you're have linked to enterprise quoting, and you need to have an item that literally is called bike, and the name has to match the rule set name in Design Studio. That's how XA, or really CPQ, knows which rule set to launch from XA. So that's how that works. And you have to have the item. You can see this red box, the low right. It has to be set up to require configuration, and there's that branding thing again. So hopefully one of these days I'll get updated to CPQ, but product configuration management is the former branding for CPQ. Of course, before that it was called by design, BUY design, a little bit of a pun there. You know, you're designing things you buy by design. And then PCM has had version 7, they're all the way up to version 8.1 dot something or other. They're up to a pretty high release level there, but that's talking more on premise. You know, we want to focus on the cloud, but still you'd have to set up the item requiring configuration, and you do need to say, hey, it's controlled by CPQ essentially, even though it's the former branding. So it's that easy to define it as configurable. But then of course you link it to a rule set, and that's where all the really good stuff happens. So how in the world can you launch the configurator from XA? So you've seen me do this from EQ multiple times now. It was pretty easy. I either for a quote or an order, I went in, and in my product catalog, if I clicked on an item that was configurable, it launched the configurator. In XA, the way it works is you have a customer order line item or a quote line item, and if the special field called the configuration ID appears on a template, which you would only want to do for configured items, otherwise it's kind of pointless for just regular stock items that aren't configurable, you click on this magic little icon here, and that causes some magic stuff to happen in the Java code, either in PowerLink or NetLink, and that invokes the configurator. All right, and that works on premise or cloud. So for cloud, you're invoking the enterprise configurator, the cloud version of the configurator. So it has to be, and it will check, that item has to be a configurable item. If you try to launch the configurator and it's not a configurable item, XA will fuss at you. Or if it can't find a rule set, then CPQ will tell XA to fuss at you. Can't find. So anyway, but assuming everything's set up correctly, you're good to go. You click that button and then CPQ is invoked. Okay, so then what happens is after you've made all your configuration options, you've selected whatever, a color and a diameter and a height, length, and width, and a gauge of steel, and all this kind of stuff, accessories. You've seen me do this with the wooden door, and then the transformer, and then the hot tub spa, and of course, just any configurable item. Once you've finished the configuration session and you've clicked on the Finish button, what happens is CPQ pushes that data to XA. It has a step called push to ERP. It happens a little differently in the cloud through the ION connection. But what XA puts temporarily in the configuration ID is one of these SKU numbers. Okay, and that means XA and CPQ are still talking to each other, and they're still figuring out how to build a unique configuration in XA. So that's what that means. So you expect that to be there, momentarily. Obviously, if it's been too long, then you have an issue, and you can figure out, what happened. The thing I find the most supporting the CPQ to XA integration is someone has added a component in a manufacturing component rule that doesn't yet exist in XA. So one of the rule set writers got wind of like an engineering change notice and put in a new component item number, but XA doesn't have that item number yet. So that'll bring the process to build that configuration to a halt, referencing a work center that doesn't exist in XA EPDM, same kind of thing. There's just different things that'll cause the configuration to come to a halt. You can find out exactly what's going on and then resolve the issue. And then you can go back into that line item, by the way, and redo the configuration. You don't even have to launch CPQ. You can just pretend to update the line item. And now at release 10, I don't know if this is back at 9.2, all you have to do is open the line item and it'll attempt to reconfigure it. All right. Because the interface tables are on the IBM System I. That's why you can do that. Okay, so that's what you get temporarily when you've come back from CPQ in XA. You have a temporary configuration ID that always begins with SKU. Okay, so what goes on now is behind the scenes, there's two unattached jobs working really hard. You have your configurator unattached job and your EPDM unattached job. And they are actually using System Link. And that's why everyone asks me, why is System Link required for CPQ to XA? And that's exactly why, because those unattached jobs use System Link to build a new configuration, which in XA EPDM terms is called an item process. If you're familiar with EPDM, you can think of an item process as the marrying together of a bill of material and a routing. And then it can be referenced in item revisions where it applies. Okay, typically, one item process applies to one particular item revision, but we won't get into, you can have generic routings and all that. But for our purposes here, for configurations, you would generate a new item process if that configuration has not been seen before. And then we put a little presentation scheme. You can see on the bottom, the line items all red. So I support, this integration and our UIG. So typically I get emails, the line's still red. Why won't it turn green? And so that's why it's our presentation scheme. And I've even seen where some of our customers have put that language in a in for incident. So I usually have to chime in and say, look, the red means it's still processing at the SKU number. And green means we have a valid config ID. You'll see that in a second. Okay, but what's happening here? Again, a lot's happening behind the scenes. So CPQ unattached job and the EPDM unattached job are reading through those interface tables, and they're doing their best to build a brand new item process that incorporates all of the configured bill of material, and it incorporates the configured routing. And then you can even have configured subassemblies as well. So the first level in the bill of material can have subassemblies that are themselves configured, and that can go on as deep as you want. We do have a CPQ UIG customer where the furthest down I've seen the UIG chase the configured subassemblies is 6 levels down. So that's pretty intense configuration of subassemblies, but we can handle it. So here's where the line has turned green on the bottom. Okay, so now what it is, it's ready for our unique item generator to process. Now you could just stay here if you want. Notice it says it's a configured item. It's generated a valid config ID, and there's the item process token. I think you all understand what's going on there with those. It's a 30-character tokenized field. It's a combination of the date and the time, the job number, and a sequential number. That's the item process token. And so once all those are there, you have a valid config ID, the item process token is no longer blank, then that is the signal that CPQ and EPDM successfully built a configuration in the item process file, okay? And again, we have this presentation scheme, so we know it's ready for our unique item generator to process. Okay, again, I talked about the two unattached jobs, the PSV TUM, the PSV TUU. They are both involved. They're using System Link to talk to each other, and they're both involved in building a unique configuration. Okay, so now this brings up an interesting point. So the endpoint of the CPQ to XA integration is an EPDM item process with a valid config ID. Okay, that's where the integration ends. That's the vanilla integration. Those item processes do have a configured cost, they do have a configured price, and they do have a configured description. And of course, they're attached to a BOM and a routing. So that all sounds good, right? So you have the alternate BOM ID refers to the bill of material for that configuration. Then your routing ID is a non-blank sequential value. Those are alpha, like AA, B, C, V, A, something like that. And so you're joining together your BOM and your routing for that configuration, and you have an item process that has a cost and a price and a description. But there's my friend Bill Shakespeare. So therein lies the rub. All right, according to Hamlet. And yes, I am aware of the fact that in the play Hamlet really says, there's the rub. But somehow through an urban myth, everyone says therein lies the rub, or if you want to sound real Shakespearean, therein lieth the rub. Okay, but that's the issue. We're ending in an item process, hence the shock-faced emoji over there, because what we want, let's take a closer look, is we want a unique item revision with its own unique item warehouse, because then you have the mega flexibility of all the extra fields. Yeah, the process has a cost, a price, and a description, a BOM, and a routing, but an item revision has a ton more. And then when you incorporate the item warehouse, it has a ton more, even more. And then, of course, you can bring in secondary extension files extending the revision in the item warehouse. So think about the fact that the process, for example, does not have a unit weight. So how do you do freight estimation, freight calculations? So you can't if you're just living at the item process level. What about like a bill of lading commodity code? Again, maybe for freight estimation purposes. What about item classes, item accounting classes? What about extra description fields? You know, XA has the 3 description fields. What about all of that? What about all the planning information and the cycle counting information and all the stocking information that's in the item warehouse? So what about all of that? That was the main reason we developed our unique item generation tool. We did develop it ourselves, we support it, and we believe it completes the CPQ to XA integration. It also expands on it and it standardizes it. So those are the last 2 bullet points. And it allows a unique item revision to be created for each unique configuration. Okay, so we're going beyond the item process to a unique item revision. And in my way of thinking, we're kind of completing the integration, because some of the other ERPs that CPQ integrates with do this. And there's a collective memory in the XA community that, hey, the old KBC configurator did a unique item, so why doesn't this much more modern tool do it? So we took care of that, so it's done. So, and I'm a big fan of alliteration wherever possible. Kind of force this one a little bit, the 5-fold federation, but I do like the way this encapsulates the flow. You start off with a GUI, a graphical user interface, or a web portal. That could be enterprise quoting. It could be PowerLink or NetLink. It could be ComNet 2. It could be the old sales portal for on-premise. But again, we're focusing on the cloud, so it'd be enterprise quoting, or possibly you have ComNet 2, or as I just showed you, you can launch the configurator from PowerLink or NetLink. So you have some type of graphical user interface or web portal, and you're configuring a customer order or quote line item. So that's where you're starting from. Then, of course, the CPQ configurator is presenting choices to the user, and they are specifying their configuration options as they go. And then good stuff could be happening with like 2D parametric drawing automation, and then 3D visual augmentation and augmented reality and all that could be happening inside the configurator, depending on the rule sets. What happens then is when you've done your configuration session, you click finish, you end up with interface tables populated on the IBM I host machine. Okay, and those tables were redone for the cloud configuration, which I'm really, really happy about, because it's much easier now to put business objects over them now that they have much more sane field names. You don't have to do SQL views anymore. You can just use them as is. That's great. Okay, then as I've talked about, the XA EPDM configured item process, the BOM and routing are built by EPDM from the CPQ data, and you end up with a configured item process. Okay, and that's where our unique item generator would then take over once those lines, quote unquote, turn green, meaning they have a valid config ID and a valid item process token. Our unique item generator can then run on one or more of those CO line item records, and it will end up giving you a unique item revision and all the other records, the enterprise item, the item revision base prices, the BOM and the routing for the unique item revision, a brand new CO line item that references that unique item, and of course, any secondary extension tables, user fields, and whatnot can be populated as well. So we believe this completes and supplements and extends and standardizes the integration. Okay, here's an example of a list of the business objects in the middle of the screen there that are belonging to the unique item generator. This, of course, is Netlink inside of System I Workspace. If you're wondering, that doesn't look like XA. So this is the most modern XA, I guess you should say, R10 Netlink inside of System I Workspace. So here's a list of the business objects, of course, in PowerLink or vanilla Netlink. Each one of these would have its own little icon on top of the label, but there they all are. So we have control records to set up the UIG, because it's very flexible in and of itself. And then we have a lot of log tables, and then we have some further setup tables as well. Okay, we do allow you to run the UIG either touchless, meaning it can run as part of the end order, the customer order or quote end order process, if you're familiar with the user exits in Enterprise Integrator, or you can run it from an icon that's associated with the quote line item and the CO line item business objects. So it's up to you. It depends on how touchless you want your orders and quotes to be, and how much review you want there to be. And of course, I should clarify that nobody runs the UIG from a quote, because you don't know if you're gonna win the quote or not. So nobody actually runs the UIG and produces unique items, because you may lose the quote. Now you've got extra items. But from customer orders, it happens all the time, because then you have your unique item warehouse, and that can help a lot with then manufacturing orders. It also helps the planning engines. The last I talked to Infor support about this about 5 months ago, the MRP, green screen MRP, does support the configurations, the item process configurations that come from CPQ. Visual Planner does not. And then Throughput supports the top level configurations, but not configured subassemblies. So that's an important consideration as well, especially for Visual Planner. It's really nice, and even required, I would say, to have these unique items instead of the configured item processes. But the point of this slide was to show that you can run it in a touchless mode if you want, or it just runs as part of the end order processing, or you can have it where someone needs to review maybe each line item, and the unique item is only generated when someone clicks on the icon, because it's ready to be converted. Here's some of the setup. I'll go through this quickly because I want to leave time for questions. So this is the famous configured chair rule set that's you see in some training sessions. You'll see it out on YouTube if you search for Infor CPQ. So what I'm doing here is, for each configuration of the chair, when it generates a unique item, it's going to start off with the item number is going to start off with CHR, and then I'm saying use a dash, so it'll be CHR dash. So the very next one will be CHR dash 00019, and so that's how the unique item numbers would stay unique. And so this next suffix number would be auto incrementing. And so then it'd be 00020, 00021, et cetera, et cetera. You can take control of the generation of the item number. A couple of our UIG customers do that. The interface table, the CPQ itself controls what the item number is going to be, and so the UIG passively accepts what's been sent and it checks to see if it's been utilized before. So that's how that would work. That's how you keep the item numbers unique. We do have very detailed logging, in my humble opinion, of course. We show everything that happens within the UIG, and you can drill down to the actual system link request and responses to see what's going on and what happened. So every line item, that's what this level's at. It's every single line item that got run through the unique item generator has a record here. And here's example how you would run the unique item generator. So you can see I have 5 line items that are green that are ready to go. Valid config ID, non-blank item process token. I have 2 that are still working in the background. So maybe this order is a real rush order. So I'm going to run the UIG for the 5 green items, and you can do that. All right, and there's the icon. Click on that icon. Of course, you can also choose the option from the user drop-down menu. Okay, and once you click the icon, here's what you get. What's the subset? You can define any valid subset. And of course, you're limited to one particular customer order at a time. So that prevents, God forbid, somebody from trying to run the UIG for every line item for every customer order. So when it's saying all records there, it's understood you're within a particular customer order. Okay, sure, I definitely wanted to leave time for questions. So that's where I'm at. I believe there's my contact information if anyone wants to get a hold of me.
All right. And if you have any questions, please feel free to post those questions in the chat. And while we may be compiling those questions, I'm going to go ahead and start sharing my screen for a second, and we'll wrap up here in just a few minutes. So the last part I wanted to touch on was continuing to build your prototype for the workshop. So we had those building blocks that we talked about last time in terms of what do we need to help you build your prototype or mini proof of concept, if you will. So we asked that you send a photo of a selected item that you would like us to help build for you, and then a limited bill of material and router. So up to 3 components with up to 4 selectable options, and then including facility names and operation numbers. So I have a template that I have emailed to hopefully most everyone. If there's anyone new that hasn't been in the first couple of sessions, then I'll get your email and send the template to you as well. But we're hoping to get those back soon, by today, ideally. And then Charles and I will start building your prototype. And then in 2 weeks, we were asking that you send us maybe some kind of a CAD drawing, either 2D or 3D, that we can incorporate into your prototype. And then we'll put all of this together at the workshop at Empower on the 14th, and you'll be able to get some hands-on experience, touch it, feel it, change it, and work with it in EQ and XA. So those are the timetables, and I will be following up with everyone. If you haven't filled out your template yet, no worries. We'll get together if we need to set up a separate session to kind of help you put the data together. We can certainly do that as well. We want to make this as effective for you and productive for you as we can for the workshop. So that's all I have, and it looks like we may have a question. Will we get a copy of the recording so I can pass on to others? Absolutely. We will have the recording. I'm actually, Christina has been building a YouTube channel. I don't know, Christina, if you could quickly grab that, the URL for that channel. We're putting all of the recordings out there. So this one will also be included on that YouTube playlist channel. And so you can see not only the first 2, but this one as well. So all 3. And then when we conclude in 2 weeks with their customer open mic session, that one will be there as well. So we'll have all 4 sessions on the YouTube playlist, and that you can easily send the link to others within your organization. Yeah, thank you, Christina, for adding that. Any other questions?
Yeah, I'm willing to take questions from any of the sessions, 1 through 3. So anything that might not be clear, anything you want to know more about, certainly willing to talk to anything related to enterprise quoting or CPQ or the interface with XA or the unique item generation.
So I think, Charles, you did a fabulous job. There's not a lot of questions. You were very clear in your.
Oh, okay. Yeah, let's run with that.
Let's
Okay.
run with.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Sounds good.
and we do hope that you can join us in 2 more weeks to hear the customer stories. They have some great stories to tell. You can ask all kinds of questions of them and how they implemented CPQ, where they are in their journey, because a CPQ is a bit of a journey in terms of how you want to implement it, how you want to roll it out, how you can phase the project, taking it, in bite-sized chunks. It doesn't have to be a big bang. So we have 2 customers that are sharing their stories, as well as we'll have some of the product managers there, some of the professional services folks. So we'll have a good group joining us in 2 weeks to continue and close out this CPQ summer series through the summer. So if there are, let me just check again, no more questions, then I think we are good for today, and we will see you in 2 weeks. Thanks for joining.
Oh, sure. I think there's a chat question.
Oh, is there a new chat question?
Oh, I'm sorry. Listen to me. I should butt out. So it's Christina sending the URL. I'm sorry.
That's okay. I saw that too.
Okay. I'm signing out.
Okay. All right. Thanks everyone for joining. We'll see you next time.